I'd like to welcome you into the basketball podcast of Mid-America. It is November 15th, and Arkansas's men's and women's basketball teams are off to 3-0 starts. Arkansas beat Old Dominion 86-77 to begin the week back on Monday, and Arkansas's women's team the next night dismantled Arkansas Little Rock. Ethan was there, had coverage of the game. You can go to that coverage and coverage from Arkansas's men's basketball games at wholehogsports.com. Good to be doing another podcast with you, Ethan. Blake, appreciate you hopping in again. Felt like the old days for an hour or so last week. Appreciate you guys being here. I guess we can get right into Arkansas's women beating Arkansas Little Rock by 41 points. I think Talia Scott had a really good opening week to her college career and went for 29 in her first two games.
29 first game, 25
second game.
And then,
okay. And then 18 against
So,
Little Rock.
Better watch out. She's only scoring 18 points
I thought
now.
it was encouraging that she got her 18 against Little Rock a little bit more efficiently. I think she got to the line 5 or 6 times, and I think only took 11 shots to get to her 18.
Yeah, she was just picking her spots pretty well. She's still it's freshman mistakes. Like, she had 4 turnovers last night. I think she had 5 the one before. As a team, they only had 8 turnovers, which is great. But it's like each game just encouraging signs as far as like kind of just like learning, I think, the college speed. And she's just so talented. I actually made this comment last night and just kind of asking the question to her, like, she's kind of like a running back whenever she gets to the rim. It's like she finds a crease in there somehow every time. She's just super strong, like getting it to the rack. Like, half the time her layups aren't even contested because she's like just really crafty getting the rim. She's leading the SEC right now in scoring. She has 24 a game as her average. So really good start to her career. She's a player that it's like she's doing things right now as a freshman. I get it. They played 3 non-conference games. Wait till they play a big-name opponent to really just start saying she doesn't look like a freshman. But so far, she doesn't. I mean, there's the freshman mistakes, but at the end of the day, I mean, she looks like she's been there, done that.
For sure. And I watched a little bit of, I think maybe the first quarter and a half of the Arkansas women's game, and I think at that point it was a little bit, I don't want to say it was out of hand already based on the way that they protected leads in their first 2 games. But to give up 4 points in the first quarter, did Mike Neighbors have anything to say about that? I mean, that's a pretty encouraging start, especially after you narrowly, won a game late last week after you led by as many as 24.
Yeah, they honestly, defense was a struggle those first 2 games. They just didn't look great. It wasn't. I'd say they didn't look bad defensively, but they definitely didn't look good. It was just kind of one of those things you're like, well, if these teams are doing this right now, what's going to happen down the road? And so Mike Neighbors said that, I mean, he wanted defense to be a huge emphasis going into this Little Rock game. It was nice for them. They finally, got a couple games under their belt. They have a lot of new faces, so it's like to actually get like usable film of new players and games, I think was really helpful, and I think was able to emphasize their inability to close and and also just emphasize some defensive things. So he actually said he went to Colby Hale to get some keeper gloves. I know Eric Musselman's really big on before a game he does a big theatric
pregame skits. Yeah, for sure.
Neighbors isn't that style, but he did get the keeper gloves and talking to his team pregame, just used them to demonstrate, being active with your hands and trying to bat around balls. And I mean, Little Rock made their first shot of the game last night and then missed 13 in a row. Little Rock isn't a good offensive team in the first place. This is a byproduct of Arkansas playing better defense and that not being a good offense, but really encouraging for that team to just handle somebody finally. I mean, the first 2 games were a little concerning. Not that those teams that they played were bad. I don't think they are. I think those teams will probably be competitive in their conferences, but if you have leads of 10 plus points late in a game, you got to be able to finish that. So just to see them come out, and yesterday they handed it to them, and they won by more points than Little Rock scored. So
always good when you can do that.
Yeah, always good to do that. I'm really impressed right now with just kind of their team. They're playing as their assist totals aren't up, and some people will be like, oh, does that mean they're not playing as a team? I just think that they really are good at picking their spots with beating people off the bounce. It's I think those assist totals will just kind of vary game to game depending on how people are guarding them. But they're really playing as a team, in my opinion. I mean, I was encouraged last night. Michaela Daniels, who's the 5th-year guard for them, she's 10th in the program scoring all time. She had 3 points, and some people might look at that and be like, oh, did she have a bad game? But almost like equally as impressed with her game as I was, you know, Talia getting 15 because she was just running the team. She was just like making sure things went how they should. She didn't have to play very much. I think she played 20 minutes, but she got 5 boards, scored 3 points on 1 shot. Like, I mean, she wasn't even taking shots. She had 3 assists. It was like she was just doing what you need your veteran captain to do, just like operating and making sure others are getting involved. So really encouraging stuff for them last night. Miriam Dowda, the sophomore from Bentonville, she had a career high 15 points. She was like being really aggressive.
She had 7 boards too.
7
something along
boards,
those
yeah.
lines.
So 15 and 7. A good game for her. Sailor Poffenbarger, she scored 12, had 8 rebounds. She leads the SEC in rebound average right now with 13 and a half a game. It just looks like this is a team that the more they keep playing together, I said this on our first podcast, it's just a lot of new faces and not having an exhibition. I mean, that first game, they played a pretty good team, and it was also like their dress rehearsal of like playing in front of people as a team. So I think the more games that they get under their belt, you'll maybe see them start to gel more and more. And the shot making's gotten better too. I mean, they shot last night 8 for 27 from 3, which isn't great. That's 30%, but I mean that's an improvement. And some of those it was a better percentage till late in the game. They had some other bench players in and were just kind of just getting some shots up. But they're looking better. I mean, they passed the eye test last night as far as like just improvements being made. It's funny, they had trouble turning the ball over the first 2 games. I think they averaged 17 turnovers in the first 2 games, which that won't cut it. And so he turned things over in practice to Amber Nicholas, now Amber Shirey, the director of operations for them. She did ball handling with them. Because she's one of the best ball handlers in Arkansas history. So she's apparently taken over, like they do ball handling now at the start of practice for 5 minutes. He said that they went 12 minutes though on our first one because he's big on, like he said, we're going 5 minutes. He means 5 good minutes whenever he does drills like that. And so if he says he wants 5 minutes and they haven't done it in 10, he's going to keep going. So apparently they went longer the first day and then they've been shortening it up ever since. But to only turn it over 8 times yesterday was a good sign for them. But I expect them to have a test this weekend
I would think so.
at A-State. So we'll see if those improvements keep up, but encouraging stuff.
I think I said this when I had to give my college highlight of the week at the sports club today. I think they're probably going into a hornet's nest on Friday. I mean, anytime Arkansas in any sport plays in Jonesboro, the people are going to come out, and that is going to be a very good road test. I think you've made the point on the board that's probably really going to help Arkansas's net.
Yeah,
'cause, I mean, they're expected probably to win that game. And any road win that you can get in non-conference is always a plus, even though if it is a Sun Belt team.
Yeah, so there's Sun Belt, and if you pay attention to the men's side, you're familiar with this. It's the same men's and women's as far as like net rankings. Like women's actually they don't do quadrants, so that's like the one difference is they don't really break it down by quadrant. But you're like on the weighted scale of the net. Like say you're playing a team that's number 100 in the net, but you play them on the road. That's basically kind of treated like you're playing the equivalent to if you played like a number 50 team at home or something. Like road wins are really valued. So A-State, they aren't bad this year by any stretch of the imagination there. Like I expect them to actually be kind of upper half of the Sun Belt. I don't think they're good, but definitely I don't think they're bad. So if they can go in there and get a win on the road and A-State finishes at the end of the year like 90 in the net or something like that, that actually really helps you out. So
yeah.
Definitely going to be a hostile environment, though. I think I was looking at ticket prices for women's games in the SEC on that day. There's like, I think 4 or 5 games that night, and the most expensive are at Arkansas State because I guess that they've probably nearly sold it out. So.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
You made an interesting point earlier about Arkansas's women's assist totals, and I think you could almost make the same case, especially for last Friday's game against Gardner-Webb. Arkansas finished that game with 11 assists, and they made 30 shots. So barely above 33% in terms of your assist rate. You probably ideally would like that to be a little bit higher. And I'm sure Mike Neighbors would love his team's assist numbers to be higher, but I think you don't worry about that as much because some of that is your players being able to create offense for themselves.
Mhm.
And Talia Scott is making me watch this team, man. She really is. She is a certified bucket getter right off the bat. I honestly, I don't cover the team. But I don't follow it as closely as you do. Obviously, I do more now that we're doing this together. But I don't know that I expected her to come out of the gates like this. But I'm not worried about Talia Scott's assist numbers. I'm just not. I think the biggest thing for her is, can you weed out? Like, I know she scored really well in the first week of the season. Maybe you get more games from her shooting the ball efficiency wise, like she did Tuesday night, as opposed to like maybe those 9 for 20 games in the first couple games of the season. I feel like that's probably a little bit of comfortability too, and the game maybe starts slowing down for her a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's some of that film watching too. In their first game against ULM, there were multiple times I went back and watched it, and don't get me wrong, like, you don't want to take a player out of a rhythm whenever they're really having success driving it to the rim. But it got to the point where in the second half, there were a couple times that they'd seen her just take them to the rack, so they were doubling her, and it left Michaela Daniels wide open, like on the wing, because her defender drew off, and Michaela was like, I think 3 for 5 in that game from 3. She was shooting really well, and it's like I think going back and watching film and seeing like, hey, I don't. In this situation, I can maybe get an assist right here, passing it up. So yeah, but like you said, like, it just depends on how they're guarding you with those assist numbers. Like, talking about the men's game having 11 on 30, like the women's, like, they didn't need necessarily yesterday a lot of assists because you had Talia Scott, just like I said, it was like a running back. It was like she sees the end zone, I'm getting there however I need to, and I'm going to score.
Right.
And so, I'm not worried about the assist numbers. Mike Neighbors even said this after a game. I think that just depends on how they're playing you. Like, if your assists are up, it's always great. I mean, nobody's ever like, our assists were too high. Nobody ever says that. But I don't think he's overreacting like, oh, our assists are too low, because he understands that. I mean, right now, I think they're like third they're top 5 in the SEC, I think, in scoring offense. So it's like, if you're getting points, he's not going to be like too concerned that you're not getting him off passes.
Right.
So,
last thing on the women's team, before we move on to Arkansas's men's last 2 games, what have you learned about Mike's team through 3 games, and what do you think you might be able to what else can you find out maybe about this team maybe after Friday?
I think honestly all I've learned is that they're getting more comfortable with each other. I'm not ready to make any prediction, like, as far as that they're I don't know how good they are. I need to see them against somebody else just to be honest, like, gauge that. But I do see improvements. So that's like the number one takeaway, is like, it seems like they're identifying things that they're struggling with and going back and they're doing well. Another takeaway, Saylor Poffenbarger is like really invaluable to that team. Whenever she went to the bench in their Murray State game, which I get it, Neighbors was just trying to get more lineups comfortable. She might have 3 fouls later on in the year, and they were up by 24 at that point. So I get why he was experimenting. But I mean, once she went on the bench, the game changed. Like, she's just so good on the glass. She's going to end up being, if she plays all 4 years here, like, probably, I'd have to crunch the numbers, definitely defensive rebounding, maybe overall rebounding, like rebounding leader. She's just got like that instinct of like, see ball, get ball. But I guess I've learned about this team mainly that they're growing. They have some playmakers, but I need to see them against a Power 5 team, to be honest.
Watch Talia Scott. You probably will not be disappointed. That girl can really go.
I think that she'll, like, I mean, right now in the women's sport, you have like some of the name, like, of course, I think everybody's heard of Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers. I think that you give Talia a year or two, I genuinely think her name will get in that conversation with a lot of these type of players. She is that good.
Pretty strong. I would watch that for sure.
Yeah.
Going back to last Friday, the nightcap of a basketball doubleheader at Bud Walton Arena, Arkansas beat Gardner-Webb 86-68, palindromed them. We've got another game to go off of since then, but I was looking back through the box score. Arkansas ends up blocking 15 shots in that game just a few days after Eric Musselman was like, our rim protection has got to get better. And I think that 15 blocks is the most that Arkansas it's the most blocks Arkansas has had in a game in nearly 3 decades. I think since '95.
Yeah, it was
against Missouri.
Yeah,
and then most blocks for an Eric coached college team. And Trevin Brazil was really good. He finished that game with 10.7 rebounds, 5 blocks. And then Mekhi Mitchell. We talked about Mekhi on the podcast last week. Question was asked, who is a guy on the team that's maybe not being talked about a whole lot or given, just a whole bunch of attention who could be down the line?
He made you look good.
If you consider 4 days down the line, then I freaking nailed it.
Yeah.
Because I almost sensed, and I know we can get into Gardner-Webb more in a minute, the Old Dominion game on Monday, Chandler Lawson starts again after he wasn't – Chandler Lawson was great against Purdue, hasn't been that since. Doesn't mean that he's not valuable, just means that he hasn't been as impactful in the last Alcorn State, Gardner-Webb, and Old Dominion now. I think he's got value on this team. I don't think there's any doubt about it, because you're gonna have an instance or a bunch of instances this season where that 7'7" wingspan, Giannis plus length, is really gonna play a role. But I could almost feel when I think Chandler Lawson did not grab a couple of defensive rebounds, or he couldn't secure a defensive rebound, seal a defensive possession, loses the ball out of bounds. And then as soon as the ball hits out of bounds right in front of the photographers, Mekhi Mitchell's already up off the bench. And it felt like that was a moment for Mekhi to go seize, and then he did it. Finishes with 15 and 10 against Old Dominion. And I ended up writing about Mekhi for my next column in HI that'll come out next week. Eric Musselman does not pass out compliments like Halloween candy with these guys, especially his front court. He's been pretty tight-lipped with his front court outside of, Jalen Graham's practice habits. TB's looking good. And Chandler Lawson's coachable. But we did not hear hardly anything at all in the preseason about Mekhi Mitchell. And part of it obviously was due because of the foot injury. And so there's not just a ton of evaluation time there, I think. He's missing time with new teammates. That's important. Coming off the bench again, it doesn't seem like he's fazed by that whatsoever. And Eric Musselman just throws he's just out here lobbing compliments to Mekhi, and I was shocked, to be perfectly honest with you, to pull a Sam Pittman. But that was impressive, and I patted myself on the back for getting a quote from Eric on Mekhi. An answer that didn't kind of turn into, we've got to protect the perimeter better and our depth took a hit, that kind of thing. I think that he is in a position now, so long as he plays well Friday against UNC Greensboro, I would not be shocked whatsoever to see Mekhi he's emerging right now, but I think you'll probably see him maybe take that step. If he keeps playing well, he could possibly cement himself back in that starting lineup just in time for the Bahamas, when you've got Stanford up first, who's got a 7-footer, and then either Michigan or Memphis, those teams are playing lights out to this point. And then you got a potential matchup with who is it? Who's left? Texas Tech, North Carolina, Villanova, Northern Iowa. I mean, I think Mekhi the last 2 games has really set himself up well to be that rim protecting interior presence of a center that I think people were kind of worried that this team didn't have in the preseason.
Yeah, that first game against Alcorn State, I forgot to punch my camera up. Now you guys can see my new haircut.
Looks good.
Last week I went back and watched, and I was like, dang, I need a haircut. So I went and got one today before the pod. So now I'm feeling good.
I almost wore a hat today. My hair is just out of pocket.
The headset's helping out. But that first game, they were talking a lot about Arkansas's length with Trevin Brazil and Bayfall. But when I was watching, I was thinking, okay, we have a lot of length. Where's the girth? When Arkansas goes up against a center or a 5 with some meat on his bones, who are they going to go to? And I think I wrote in my notes we have a girth defect.
That's really good
in the front court. But Mekhi Mitchell kind of solves that problem.
He does not have a girth defect.
Yeah. He's a beefier presence inside, which I think Arkansas was lacking when you just have Trevin Brazil in the paint.
And talking about things not getting passed out like Halloween candy, double doubles are never easy to come by. To get 15 and 10 for him in 29 minutes, That's really impressive to me. I mean, especially it's kind of weird because you look at the plus minus, and it's like the only guy on the team with a
Isn't that wild?
minus was Mekhi Mitchell with -1. But I think just that stat can be deceiving sometimes because it depends on what all lineups you have up defensively. Anybody who watched that game knows the Razorbacks probably don't. I don't want to say don't win that game. It's a lot more. It's a lot different, maybe of an outcome though, like a lot closer if Mekhi Mitchell isn't doing what he's doing because a double in that type of game, you just needed somebody to get those boards.
He got a double in a game when second chance points was what was keeping Old Dominion in it.
Yep.
And Old Dominion not necessarily getting the second chance points, but getting the second chance opportunities is what put Chandler Lawson on the sideline and put Mekhi in. Mekhi, I think he blocked 4 shots against Gardner-Webb last week. I think he only had 1 block against Old Dominion. Need to look and see what I go back and track all of these shots defended numbers. Mekhi, I had him the other night. He gave up 6 buckets on 13 shots defended, which not great, but like you had to play him. It almost felt like you had to play him. But against Gardner-Webb, he gave up 2 buckets on 7 shots. So that's more along the lines of what Mekhi can do for you. Just he can block shots. If he doesn't block shots, he can put that girth on you, and he can body you and make you second guess whether you're gonna try him again in the restricted area. And also, if you pick on Joseph Pinion, he's going to put your ass on the floor too. We found out that the other night. So they're probably crafting a statue for him in Morrilton.
Yeah. No, and it, like you said, like just on the shots defended, it's almost like kind of to be, no, I don't want to say to be expected to give up that many, but like he is, we got to remember like recovering from an injury as far as like defense might be a little like you use your feet on defense a lot. So maybe that's something that we'll see some improvement on. But just if you're shooting so efficiently on the offensive end, like you did 6 or 7, putting up 15 points, Tim, like you can't not play. Like the defense, I think I don't have any question about him being a good defender. We saw him last year enough. It's like, I think that the more comfortable he gets out there, the more, like you said, maybe cemented he'll get kind of into that starting rotation. I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, if here in the next week or so, we see him kind of just back in that regular spot.
Yeah, for sure. Keeping with Mekhi, I like to look at KenPom as like my go-to source for obviously college basketball analytics, and they've got the schedule. It's easy to pull up and look at. But if you look at some of these player stats, Mekhi Mitchell has only played 41.7% of the available minutes this season, and in order to be nationally ranked in some kind of a category on KenPom, you got to play at least 40% of your team's minutes. So he barely crosses that threshold. He probably wouldn't have if he played like 25 minutes the other night against ODU, but he got to 29, which is he's only played that many minutes in a game just a handful of times. But KenPom has Mekhi 74th nationally with an 8.7% block rate. So he's blocking 8.7% of opponents' 2-point shots when he's on the floor. That's a good number. An even better number, Trevin Brazil, he is 55th nationally at 10.2%. And if you would factor in, I think he's blocked 2 or 3 3-point shots this year, that number is probably north of 12 or 13%. He has been otherworldly in terms of, contesting shots. Eric got onto him a little bit for, maybe falling asleep a little bit off the ball with one of Old Dominion's shooters. But through the last 2 games, Trevin's got 9 blocks in his last 55 minutes played. You can't really do much better than that, I don't feel like. He gave up, let me see, against Old Dominion, he gave up 4 buckets on 9 shots defended. And the night before that, he gave up 4 on 15 shots defended against Gardner-Webb. 8 for 24, you'll take that, I think, especially as much as I don't think I expected Trevin against Gardner-Webb necessarily to defend 15 shots, but he did because he can. And I think he's putting himself in a good position as a defender That shows you, I think, that he's healthy, he's confident in himself. And then if you look at that dunk that he almost finished the other night, um, he tried to send somebody else to the core of the earth, and he just barely missed it. But that kid is playing with such supreme confidence. And I asked him after the Gardner-Webb game, I said, in the preseason, you told me down at Birmingham at SEC Media Day, I said, how close do you feel back to 100%? And he's like, I feel like I'm 110%, or that's the goal, is to be 110. So I asked him last Friday, said you want to be 110? How close are you to 110? He said he was 120%. I hope he turns that into a bit. And so by the time like he has a good game, first game in the Bahamas, and he's like up to 135%, that would be pretty good. What are y'all's thoughts been on TV? And he's knocking down the three at a pretty good rate. Shot looks good. I think he's been pretty efficient with his shots too. Like he scored in double figures, I think, in each of the first 3 games, and it's not like he's not having to take 8, 9, or 10 shots to get there.
My thoughts on Trevin, when I watch him play, sometimes his physical intensity and some of the rebounds he's going after and some of the falls that he's taken
Scary
for going after those rebounds, I'm like, oh man, there was late in the game the other day. He took a pretty hard fall after he snatched a rebound out of the air and got fouled. And the way he landed, I was just thinking, oh no, that didn't look very good. But he got up. But yeah, his physical intensity on both ends of the floor is really impressive, and you can just see it in his face. You can see the amount of perspiration on his face. He's getting after it out there.
He is 7 of 9 on 2-point attempts this year, 4 of 7 from 3. And his biggest frustration right now might be that he's just 8 of 12 at the free throw line. He's getting to the line at a pretty good rate. So he's taken, for every 4 field goal attempts he takes, he's taken 3 free throws. So I think Eric Musselman will obviously like that. L. Ellis the other night was really, really good. And I think L. Ellis might be number 1 on our ball knowers list, because it seems like he listened to Ethan's thoughts the other day on who might lead the team in scoring, and then he went out and put up 17 for you.
Yeah, I was, y'all both were going with Caleb Battle, and I've seen enough ball now that I would change my answer right now, but L. Ellis did me good. He went out and he had his best game yet by like a wide margin. Just I think he had 17 points, correct? And his assist totals is what was so impressive on Monday night against Old Dominion. I think L. Ellis is one of those players that as the season progresses, maybe he won't be the leading scorer like I predicted. I still think there's he could, but Caleb Battle is so good at getting to the free throw line. Like I think he's taken 13 more free throw attempts than anybody else on the team this season. So that'll get you to that usually helps get you to that leading scorer spot. But Ellis,
he's 21 for 25 already.
Yeah, I mean, that dude he knows how to score. It's just, I'm like, Ellis, you did me good for one night. I don't know if this is sustainable against Battle, because that dude knows how to get himself a bucket. But Ellis, he's that guy that you might look at the end of the year and it's like, I hate to use the word most indispensable, because with this team, I think you could name like 4 different, like Trevin Brazil. I mean, clearly you would say indispensable after last year, what you saw with the team. I know it's a different team now, but I think Ellis, from just watching a game and seeing how good he is handling the ball, getting it to other players, getting involved, he can score. He's a willing scorer. He might be, in my opinion, like that indispensable guy by the end of the year. I mean, I think he'll be top. If he might not be the leading scorer, but I think he'll be definitely top 2 or 3. And so it's like he's the type of guy that without him, it's other people aren't getting their points, and he creates so much offense for you as well. So I liked his game a lot the other night. I mean, the coach for I'm blanking on his name. His last name is James. Coach at Old Dominion. He immediately pinpointed. I asked him afterwards, like it just seemed like y'all were getting so close, but you couldn't cross. Like it's like every time you got close, Arkansas had an answer, and he just immediately was just L. Ellis. That guy just killed us basically. How that he was basically saying like L. Ellis is the reason that they withstood all those rallies. So I think that, he's just really indispensable to this team.
I ended up writing a sidebar on L. Ellis after the game on Monday. There were several different ways it could have gone. Like Devo was great, had 16 points, finally looked a little bit more like himself. He was looking for his shot again after maybe he took a little bit of a back seat the first couple nights, finished with 16. and went back and tracked shots defended. Devo gave up 3 buckets on 12 shots. So Eric was like, we need our guards to defend better, but he may not have had Devo, at the top of that. We got to clean some things up on defense list, even though he did call him out after the game for going under a couple of threes on his defensive assignment. But I thought Devo was largely good. Had maybe the play of the night, definitely the highlight where he tipped that pass. It was a bad pass from El. I mean, let's be honest. I don't know what he was seeing on that play in particular, but Devo was heady enough, savvy enough to tip it to TB, and he tore the rim off, basically.
I think that was number 3 on top plays on SportsCenter, yeah.
Yeah. You can read about that. Matt wrote a sidebar on that on Monday night. I ended up, like I said earlier, I wrote the sidebar on him, and I was live tracking potential assists. So, like, if I pass the ball to Blake in the right corner and he shoots it off the side of the backboard, I still get a potential assist even though he blew it for me. That kind of thing. But if I pass it to you again and you make it the second time, 2 potential assists, 1 actual. El had 10 potential assists the other night, accounted for 21 points. So his 17 plus the 21 that he generated, 38. Yep. Am I mathing right? This is a struggle today with adding just simple numbers. But 38 points, I think I wrote on the board the other day, 44% of Arkansas's offense came from El Ellis. That was where it started. He was really good. And then I think the thing that is most intriguing to me, and I've tracked this in the past with guys like Jalen Williams, Arkansas, when Jalen Williams was here, shot phenomenal from 3 on passes set up by Jalen because he put them on the money. He put passes in guys' shot pockets, and they were able to get off good looks. Arkansas was 5 of 7 from deep the other day when El set them up. I think that's a good number. And for the season, I've tracked it. They're 12 of 18 from 3 on shots that El sets up from the perimeter. So El was really good. The only gripe I think that you could probably have with him, I had him giving up 6 buckets on 14 shots and give up 2 threes on 5 threes defended. But he was the first Arkansas guard since December 2020, I think, to go for at least 17, at least 8 assists, and exactly no turnovers. Jalen Tate was the last guy to do that. So pretty good company to be in if you're El Ellis. I know Eric was talking after El had matched a career high in rebounds against Gardner Webb last Friday. He was, talking about how guards that Eric's had in the past have been good defensive rebounders, and he brought up a Jalen Tate, where you're in the same conversation with a Jalen Tate, just for a different reason. I think Eric's probably got to like that. We're going to hit a break. On the other side of it, we'll maybe get into Caleb Battle a little bit more, maybe some Devo Davis. We're going to go around the SEC. There's been a lot of interesting games with involving teams in the SEC, including Kentucky and Kansas on Tuesday was a phenomenal game, especially early season, really high level. We'll get into some of that, and we'll look ahead to Arkansas's game against UNC Greensboro on Friday.
Stay on top of all Arkansas Razorback sports with a Digital Plus subscription on the Hogs Illustrated app. Get complete Razorbacks coverage in one location. Your subscription gives you 20-plus issues of Hogs Illustrated magazine, the most unique and compelling coverage anywhere in the state, plus total access to all the content on WholeHogSports.com, including breaking news, commentaries, analysis, features, recruiting, award-winning photos, and premium message boards. Subscriptions start at just $17 per month. Join the Hog Sports Network team at subscribe.waco.com. That's subscribe.wehco.com. Or call 479-684-5509 to get your front row seat to Arkansas Razorback sports. Go Hogs!
Welcome back into the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America. We teased that we were going to talk about Devo Davis a little bit, maybe some more Caleb Battle. Mentioned earlier that Devo had 16 points, which I think is really good. He got it on 6 of 11 shooting. The 3 that he knocked down, I haven't been a big fan of his 3-point shot selection to this point in the season. I think you guys would probably agree with that. There's been like some NBA range type stuff, a lot of off the dribble shots that, he can make, but I think he's better suited. Maybe his skill set off the dribble in the mid range, if that makes sense. I like him short threes, catch and shoot. And I think the 2 threes, I think he's made 2 threes this season, and he's 2 for 11. Both of the threes that he's taken and made short catch and shoots. Does Devo get going from 3 again like he did last year? And is it just as simple as, take a step in and, don't get it in your head that these have to be NBA range 3-point shots that you're getting? Because I don't think anybody else really. I'm questioning their 3-point shot selection at this point.
I think if I'm not remembering incorrectly, kind of the same thing last year early in the season, right? It's really struggled from 3 to start out this season. And then by season's end, it was like he was taking, he was in my opinion, by the end of last season, their best 3-point threat.
And he shot almost 42% from 3 in conference play.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it was almost like as much as Musselman gets used to like having a new team and how these, you wonder if it's the same way for Devo just on the court. It's like kind of trying to figure out when's his spot to start taking shots. When is that needed? You wonder if like early season, just learning his new teammates, maybe sometimes he is forcing these shots that, into last year, it kind of felt like he needed to force some a little bit at times, in my opinion, like just with their lack of 3-point threat really anywhere else kind of down the stretch. You wonder if it's like just a matter of learning his place in the offense.
Yeah.
I don't question.
Definitely a feeling out process for him early in the year.
Yeah. I don't question his ability to make some threes. I think his percentage right now isn't indicative of the type of shooter he is. I just don't think that's the case. I think it might be more indicative of him figuring out like just his role scoring the ball from deep. Is he even needed to take that many shots from deep this year with the guys that you have? So I think you'll see his percentage go up, maybe volume go down. So, I'm not really too concerned about him. The same way that I talked about Michaela Daniels on the women's side, I kind of feel like he's similar right now in a sense of like, she's shooting the ball better, but he's kind of just doing, when you look at the team as a whole, it's almost like he's quietly there, but that he's just doing the things that he needs to do to help the team. The game against Old Dominion was a real, like, just visible impact or visualization of that. But I think the shooting will get better just as he feels things out. And I think he's the type of player that he just wants to win.
Yeah, for sure.
He just wants to win. And so he's going to do whatever it takes to help out the team.
I always go back after games and I nerd out with this stuff. I catalog every shot that each guy takes by shot type. Here I'm going to run through Devo's made field goals against Old Dominion. Okay. Catch and shoot 3 left corner, drive floater, transition layup, offensive rebound layup, transition layup. That sounds like Devo to me, not the off the dribble 3-point shots from like 2 or 3 feet behind the arc. Like that to me, maybe Devo can add that, but I think Devo at his best, Devo in March, man, what was he doing? He was getting to the rim. He was putting major pressure on the rim, making guys try to stay in front of him, and they just couldn't. But that's to me prime Devo. Blake, you got a thought on him?
Yeah, you mentioned kind of him figuring out his role. I do think last year you saw there was a lot of games when, before March, Devo didn't really ingratiate himself to the fans. He would have games where he'd be like 5 of 20 from the floor or like 6 of 18. And fans were getting upset, like, why is he taking so many shots? Why is Devo even taking threes at all? I do think that since he's been here for so long, and he's basically had a new team to adjust to every single year, he is still finding his place in the offense. But like you said, March Devo is what people like. And March Devo is transition basketball.
Right.
And, getting to the rim, like you said, not shooting NBA range threes. And especially on this team that has more offensive weapons and more guys that can shoot threes, you really don't need Devo in that role at all, really.
Yeah. And you wonder, I wonder, we keep on mentioning like Devo in March, how he plays. Like, is this now as like an upper husband, does he kick it into gear and figure out his role quicker than he has in the past, just with that experience of learning like his role? That's what I want to see. I want to see if like down in the Bahamas or even by the time they come back and play Duke at home, is he being that player that's just like really aggressive, going to the rim, good defender, and maybe cutting out some of these things that we've seen early in the year. Some other years, maybe learning from the past that like, hey, I have other teammates that I can fit within my role a lot. Like I don't have to stretch my role. We have weapons on this team.
Yeah, I could really see him becoming a guy, and maybe you see some of that vocal leadership come out next week in the Bahamas. And if he does, I will be there and I will ask him about it because I'm going and I can't wait. Got a 5:45 flight Monday morning. Can't wait for that one. But going back to mention the Kansas game last year, 8 of 11 on 2-point shots against Old Dominion the other night, 5 of 7. So smaller, I mean, less volume, but that's more along the lines of him. And I think like you go to the Bahamas and you play, they're going to be playing games in a ballroom. Okay. So that's a different venue to shoot in, different sight lines, all that different backdrop, that kind of thing. You know what's not different in a whole lot of gyms is layups. Layups are the same in gyms. It's not always easy to shoot in every single gym. But kudos to Devo the other night. Really, he looked like himself again. Probably for the first time since that Kansas game. I know there haven't been too many games, but 16 points, pretty good.
You did mention Eric being upset with one of the screens that he decided to
go under,
go underneath. I think I know exactly which one he's talking about because when I rewatched the game, it was pretty funny because he tries to go into the screen, but then the screener made his way closer to the basket, and Devo's just kind of going for a ride with him. Like the guy's just pushing him, and Devo was just going for a ride, and then the guy was just wide open. But you also mentioned being vocal on defense, and I think that's where Devo could really help because one thing I did notice in the game against Old Dominion, there were multiple times when an Old Dominion player would set a screen and there's no communication at all on Arkansas's defense. There was no switching, and then the on-ball defender would try to go around. There would be no space for him to cut under the screen. So then he's going around the off-ball defender and the guy setting the screen.
Right.
And so one screen is taking away 2 players for Arkansas, and that's how Old Dominion was getting some of these wide-open looks. And it happened multiple times where if you're not going to switch, then the off-ball defender needs to make some space for the Arkansas player to get underneath the screen, and they weren't doing that, and it was just creating like log jams
right
around the perimeter, and Old Dominion was knocking them down.
I think you make a good point about the ball screen defense. I think when Eric calls for more physicality from his guys, I think ball screen defense is not necessarily like maybe the second or third place we go. It's always, are your elbows sharp in the restricted area going for rebounds, and can you box your guy out, that kind of stuff. I think ball screen defense, like the guards have got to, like, if could be one of those instances where, do you remember Kobe in the Olympics several years ago? I think it was Pau Gasol. He just barreled through his chest through a ball screen, just like send somebody a message and let them know that you're there. Obviously, Eric's probably not going to like the cheap foul that you give up, but I think these guards have got to let these screen setters know that they're there, let them feel them, and I think that could potentially pay dividends within the same game, potentially. Do you have a thought on that? I can move on. I
have a thought just in general about like the defense of the team and defending the perimeter. I think that they're in a good spot right now that the offense is so good that like it was like I don't think last year's team defended better at this point, but like I don't think last year's team had the firepower to outlast what Old Dominion did the other night. I think last year's team would have gotten beat by that team just the way that they were shooting the ball. This year's team just can. It's positive that this year's team has this type of offense to do it, and defense is something that you can coach over. Like if you just can't shoot the ball like last year's team, I mean, you might catch lightning in a bottle a game or two and just be shooting really well, but it's out of the ordinary. You can coach defense over year and get better defensively. I think that this team is so good offensively right now that it's like that's where you want to be, is like your improvements need to be on the defensive end. I know Eric is not happy right now at all with the perimeter defense, but like that is something you can coach and they will get better at. If they didn't have this type of offense and like shot making ability, at this point of year, it probably would have cost them a game the other night. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they were just answering every punch. I mean, to shoot 42% from three, 51% from the field, like, the questions aren't on offense, it's on defense. Musselman's really good about developing a team defensively throughout the year. I think they're in a better spot than they were this time last year for sure, as far as like coachable things to fix. It just feels like each game there's a new like maybe area that stands out of like this really needs fixed. And it feels like they address it and then a new one kind of pops. It's like always just like patching holes. I think at some point just a lot of these get patched enough to where it's like you're nitpicking like on like I just think the defense will really transform as the year progresses. I like where they're at offensively, and I don't think last year's team would have won that game.
No, I don't. I definitely don't either. And yeah, well, you mentioned it. Last year's team just didn't have the offensive firepower to withstand what Old Dominion hit 9 of 11 threes in one span, and then I think it was 11 of 15 over a slightly longer stretch. There's no way last year's team, I don't think, withstands that, and they would probably drop that, like some other teams around the league have in this early season. But I think and that kind of leads me into my next question: did Monday night's result bother you at all? I mean, they led for over 35 minutes, but you never felt like it was firmly put away, but you still won the game, right? Like 8 points, 9 points. Here we go with the math again.
It's like Ethan said, a lot of this stuff is coachable, and I think that the lack of communication we're seeing on defense, I think that's going to come with more chemistry, and I think that the chemistry will come with getting more games under their belt with this team. You asked if there was any concerns. I guess I'm a little concerned that they're going into such a tough stretch in the Bahamas just next week, and I think Arkansas has, one more game before the Bahama run?
Yeah.
Against, UNC Greensboro?
Right.
There are some concerns, and you just wonder, and if you go back to last year, the Maui Invitational, they beat Louisville. Louisville is a horrible team.
Louisville was basically a vacation bye game.
Right. And then they lose to Creighton. They beat San Diego State, but that game only went into overtime because San Diego State made a really bonehead play and to send it to even give Arkansas an opportunity to send it to overtime. So you almost go 1-2 down in Maui, and kind of same situation I think we might see in the Bahamas. This team, I think, needs some more time to gel, and so I'm not expecting them to go out and win the battle for Atlantis by any means. I think and I also think that we're probably, when conference play starts, I think we're probably going to see one of those early conference Musselman style, not to put it all in Musselman, say a Musselman style slump, but it's kind of a trend.
Yeah.
But it's just because there's so many new faces on the team every year, and they just need time to gel. I think they will gel. By the time we get to March, everything will be worked out. But yeah, right now I think there's just a lack of chemistry, especially on defense.
And talking about areas of concern, I think the 3-point defense is a concern. But like Old Dominion making 9 out of 11, like people don't do that in a shooting contest, like with no defender, like the racquetballs, people don't make 9 out of 11 usually. Like they just shot really well. The area of concern to me is still the offensive rebounds for opponents. Like that just concerns me because it's what Eric pointed out after Gardner-Webb, and it did not. I mean, the second half there were some adjustments against Old Dominion, but it did not get fixed. I mean, to give up, I think it was 12 offensive rebounds by the end of the game. It was 8 in the first half, I think. I mean, their early offense, the only points they were getting were putbacks. So that's the area of concern for me because, like me and Blake have been saying, like that's a coachable thing. Like you just have to. I would hate to be a player in practice this week with how many box out drills they're probably doing, and like, I mean, the 2 drills that as a player you just are like groaning as like rebounding drills and closing out drills. I feel like that is all practices. It's like closing out, defending the 3, and boxing out. So it's probably been some really intense practices.
And Ethan speaks from experience. You were a manager in Mike Anderson's last season and Eric's first season.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Ethan's speaking from experience. He's seen those guys with the bricks out.
But hey, the good thing about that first year, as a manager for them. I think number 1 in the nation in 3-point defense.
Yeah.
So that wasn't too much of a. The rebounding drills were pretty crazy that year. An undersized team.
If I do have a concern, I think it is 3-point defense at the moment. Opponents are shooting 35.7% from three against Arkansas to this point. And I think the 11 threes that Old Dominion hit were the most since Tennessee, like toward the end of the 21-22 season. So it's been a while since Arkansas had given up that many. And Old Dominion's not college level Golden State. Like they shot the ball pretty bad the first couple of games that they played before they came to Arkansas. But I think the things that you do like defensively, top 20 in block rate, top 35 in 2-point field goal defense, and then offensively, you're top 35 in turnover percentage, that's always been a hallmark of Eric's teams. Like his good teams have always taken really good care of the ball, valued the basketball. And then as a team, you're shooting 40.3% from deep. So I think there's definitely some things that you can like about this team through 3 games, and then obviously the test on Friday. I think it will be a test, obviously, and I think this week has been. This week I kind of circled it as a big week because you always look at the first or the last couple games before you travel somewhere to play in an MTE where it's not like the rest of the season and you're playing back-to-back days. Oh, by the way, 4 days after you get home, you get Duke. Oh, by the way, a few days after that, you get Furman. A week later, you get Oklahoma. It's about to get really tough. And so I think you've got a couple of really tough teams that have or are coming into Bud Walton this week. I think Arkansas knew what they were doing, putting the schedule together, despite what the haters say. I guess we can get into let's just go around the SEC. You want to do that instead of talking about Greensboro? I think the only thing I had in that game was TB got hurt against them last year.
I think Greensboro played Vanderbilt yesterday, right?
They did.
Lost by 4.
Yep, Greensboro lost by 4.
I get it. Vanderbilt's not great this year, but still to play a
Vandy
team.
Lost to Presbyterian in their opener.
Yeah, so who knows if Greensboro is good or not.
Yeah.
Last year gave them a tight game, so.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they needed Nick Smith to do his thing to get out of there with a win. Just go over some of these games. Like I mentioned earlier, Kentucky and Kansas. Kentucky looked really good for a lot of that game, and then Kansas just took over. Kansas had a guy go for a triple-double. Hunter Dickinson went for 20 and 20, and then DeJuan Harris had the game of his freaking life last night. Hit a couple big threes to really get them back into that game. I think Kentucky's going to be fine. They're missing some pieces, and I think there's some reason for optimism with Cal's young team. Those freshmen are pretty good. Speaking of the Bahamas, Memphis went to Missouri last week and put the hammer down on them. Beat them by 15 in Columbia last Friday. I was listening to the Eye on College Basketball podcast with Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander, and interesting note that they had on Memphis. Penny Hardaway, I think it was the first game of his second year at Memphis. He started all 5 freshmen. And this year, I think his top 5 scorers against Missouri, their average age was almost 23. And Javon Quinterly, who's the former Alabama guard, he turns 25 later this month. So he's like halfway to drawing his Social Security check. But Arkansas is going to have to keep an eye on him for sure.
He's got a mortgage already, I heard.
Yeah, he can pay mine too if his NIL money's good enough. Texas A&M, I think, has been one of the more impressive teams in the SEC to this point. I mean, they've already got a couple road wins in the first week and a half of the season. Went to Ohio State and won on the road, and then, I mean, you can say what you want about SMU, but I think I would imagine, I haven't checked the box score or whatever to look at attendance, but you get a Texas school has another Texas school top 15 in the country coming into their building. It was probably pretty rowdy, but I like Wade Taylor a lot, and Tyrese Radford I think is playing pretty well for them. They've got Henry Coleman back. That is a pretty tough team. Do y'all have any thoughts on Texas A&M? I think they this week in the AP poll they were the team that jumped Arkansas to 13th.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think that it was predicted coming in. Like, you just knew what all they had coming back. It's
Yeah.
like these early season results for them don't surprise me that much because it's a team that they had so many faces coming back. I think that that's going to be, I mean, if way too early to be predicting how the SEC is going to shake out. But I mean, I just think that right now it's kind of, you see a pool of teams of Arkansas, Tennessee, A&M, Kentucky, Bama, just kind of jockeying it out near the end. I mean, I think all these teams have just so many good pieces. And Buzz Williams, I mean, people hate him. A lot of people hate him. He's a good coach, though. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep that non-conference momentum riding into conference play, because you wonder, you know, kind of the reverse that Arkansas has, where it's always trying to figure things out in conference play with all these new faces, with how many returners that they do have. You wonder if they're going to take conference play maybe by storm a little bit until other teams kind of catch up.
One thing I have noticed that Buzz Williams is a really well-dressed coach.
He is sharp-dressed man.
He's one of the sweatiest coaches I've ever seen.
Also true.
And I'm wondering, like, I feel bad for whoever does his dry cleaning, but I'm also wondering if maybe after the game he just throws his clothes in the garbage. I mean, that'd probably be easier than cleaning it.
Does sweat a lot.
He does. I mean, how could you not in a three-piece? I mean, what are we doing here, man? Get with the times. Like, you don't have to do this. Like, you just don't. I think he just wants to look really sophisticated.
It's nice.
He does it.
Yeah.
But it just seems like overkill to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was doing his wardrobe, if I was, you know, dressing Buzz Williams, I'm thinking maybe a dry fit polo, like
maybe a little bit bigger than the
wear.
one that Bruce Pearl is wearing, though.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit less form-fitting.
They have a
probably
game.
shouldn't have said that, but
They have a game in mid-December at home against Houston. I think that'll be a telling game.
Yeah.
Early in the year.
another one, Tennessee went to Wisconsin and won by double figures. And I don't think they got very much in that game from Santiago Vescovi. So I think that's or is it Vescovi or Vescovi?
I've heard all the above. At this point, kind of choose your name. I'm
Yeah.
going to call him Vescovi.
Yeah, that's cool. We'll put it in the commandments for this podcast. We're calling him Santiago Vescovi until Tennessee's communications department gets with us. That's a pretty good win. I mean, Wisconsin's got basketball history. Just because you have basketball history doesn't mean you've got a good program currently. But I think Wisconsin gets up for basketball. That's a good early season win. Detroit Mercy almost got him a good early season win against Ole Miss. What is Chris Beard doing? How are you only beating Detroit Mercy by a point? I think didn't Detroit Mercy have a kid that was like almost the NCAA's all-time Division I leading scorer? They don't have him anymore. I don't think you're still almost caught an L to them.
It might be a long year for Chris Beard, getting this thing, because he's kind of, I compare him very much to like Hugh Freeze in the coaching world. Like, he'll get that team back to right. It's just, can he do it in the first year? And their results so far: 10-point win over Alabama State, 11-point win over East Washington, and then a 1-point win over. It might be a long year for them.
All 3-0 starts are not built the same.
Yeah, they're not all created equal.
Yeah, they're not created equal. That is for sure. I think the only other games that I really had were Vanderbilt lost to Presbyterian in the opener, which is like, Stack, if you want to keep your job, dude, like that's not a way to do it. But you bounced back, you beat Greensboro before. I guess that is a good result after losing to Presbyterian, because I would venture to guess Greensboro is probably better than Presbyterian. But then the other one, I kind of mentioned it, threw a little bit of salt toward the end of the last podcast, but Auburn lost to Baylor in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, up in the Pentagon. That was a pretty fun game. I just think like Auburn's got some good pieces. Like, I like the Denver Jones kid that transferred, I believe, from Florida International. I like Janai Broom from a production standpoint, but they've got a new kid they've got a new player on their team. His name is Chad Baker Mazzara. They've also got Katie Johnson, and that is almost too much chaos if they're on the floor at the same time. Like, there is just so much almost extra energy about those guys. And I wonder if maybe I'm speaking out of the side of my head, but I watched that game and I just didn't like the vibe that I got. But I do think Aiden Holloway, he's another good one. I think he had 18 or 19 against Baylor off the bench really talented freshman, shooting it really well early in his career. Auburn thoughts at all?
I don't know what to make of them either. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a really entertaining game.
It was very entertaining.
I mean, if you didn't watch it like me, but you got to, I went back and watched the highlights. I feel like I missed out on like just a great viewing experience
It
in
was a
live
good game,
time.
yeah.
That's one of those teams. I mean, there's just so many teams in the SEC that you're like, they could either be complete boom or bust. And that's one of them to me. I'm like, this is either going to work out great for them or they're going to be, I don't know, kind of back to taking second tier in the league. Not many more thoughts on Auburn yet, though.
One thing I did notice in that at the end of that Kentucky-Kansas game last night, when they're doing the handshake line, Jay Bilas was talking about how good Kentucky looked and how good the SEC is looking this year. And he mentioned Kentucky and Texas A&M and Alabama. And I'm thinking, why didn't Jay Bilas mention Arkansas? The other announcer said, you got to watch out for Arkansas, too. They look really good. Then I remembered that Jay Bilas has gotten into it with Hunter Yurachek on Twitter. And so
right.
I thought, maybe that's why Jay Bilas didn't mention Arkansas. And the other announcer had to chime in and was like,
I heard
don't forget about Arkansas.
Yeah.
They look really good, too.
Yeah, I was like half paying attention at that point, and then I just heard Arkansas to the corner of my ear. So it's good to hear this context because I completely missed that it was an initial leave out of the statement.
What have they announced who the call team is going to be for that Arkansas Duke game? Like Bilas has got to be at that one, doesn't he? Like just come down here, make up with Hunter Yurachek, sit courtside for the scene of the year, potentially in college basketball in terms of like regular season games. Like that's got to be the move for him.
I feel like
he hasn't covered a game here before.
I feel like
that's
he will
that's
be
the one
here.
to do it.
I just think that like that's the type of matchup that a guy like him isn't gonna not be here for.
Arkansas Duke should get the Dan Schulman, Jay Bilas treatment. That's the A team to me. Like if you can't get Fran Fraschilla to call a game, I want those two guys calling a college basketball game for me.
Are we still on the SEC topic too?
Sure.
I know that I'm committing the cardinal sin of like not comparing like games against similar teams, but I just want to give a shout out to I think it was at Media Day. Lamont Paris went first for South Carolina.
Yeah.
Hey, Vanderbilt beat South Carolina upstate by 7. Season opener, South Carolina beat them by 29. So, hey, I don't know if we should be using South Carolina upstate, as our barometer of where a team's at. But South Carolina is 3-0 right now. And Lamont Paris said at Media Day, like, hey, basically he was saying, count us out. It's never right anyways, like the standings. South Carolina's 3-0. They've beaten Virginia Tech by 2. I don't know if Virginia Tech is any good, but hey, the Gamecocks are 3-0. So I just feel like
the name. So I think if you know the name at this point early in the year, I think that's pretty solid.
I'm giving them a shout out. I like Lamont Paris, and maybe South Carolina won't stink.
Before we get out of here, just some of the other games of note later this week, early next week. Tennessee plays Syracuse. That'll be interesting. Let's see. Mississippi State, Washington State, Auburn, Notre Dame. That'd be interesting. Florida State, another good one. Missouri's playing Minnesota. I don't know that I'll even think about watching that one. Georgia plays Miami. I think Miami's probably the chances of a boat race might be pretty good in that one. Miami going Miami's way, and then Vanderbilt plays UCA. If Stack loses to UCA, I don't know that this is gonna. I don't know this is gonna reach conference play.
And didn't he lose Mike Wright to LSU? Or not Mike Wright.
He lost Studi.
Mike Wright's the quarterback at Mississippi State that transferred from Vanderbilt.
Lost a kid to LSU. You said?
I think he lost
Jordan Wright.
Jordan Wright.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt football lost Mike Wright, so they're just losing all these rights.
To Mississippi State.
But I'm just like. You just felt like that team near the end of last year was like maybe like, oh, we're getting momentum. Like these guys all like being here and they like Stack. And then this happens to start the year. I don't know. It's up for Vanderbilt if they can get out of this, but they don't.
Yeah, after they play UCA, they got NC State on a neutral floor, and a little bit later down the line, Texas Tech on a neutral floor. And then they play Memphis. Like at Memphis, that's. The way Memphis is playing right now, that's not going to be pretty either. So if the TV is on and your children are awake, you might usher them into another room, protect the little eyes, Memphis is looking really good. I think that might be. Obviously, I think if we have our say in what happens in the Bahamas, Arkansas wins that first game and they play Memphis. I mean, that's the dream scenario. I think the only way that it could be better is if Arkansas then beats Memphis and then moves on to play North Carolina. I think in that final round, like Villanova would be cool to an extent. Texas Tech, kind of Eric's done that with Texas Tech already, even though he hasn't played Texas Tech with Grant McCaslin, but North Carolina with Armando Bacot and RJ Davis back, like that would be one hell of a game.
Calling it now. If Arkansas and Memphis play in the Bahamas, you will hear at least 5 people in your life say something like, "Oh, they could have just gone to Little Rock and played this one when they had to go." You will hear it. There will be somebody make the joke after it's been made 1,000 times of like, "Oh, they could have just played here, but they had to go to the Bahamas." I'm just giving y'all a warning.
I hope it happens.
It's the best matchup scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're trying to go over there and get our money's worth for sending me to that tournament. Let's make it happen. Eric, Penny, let's do it. I mean, I'm all on board on that. I mean, I've what was it, like 2003 or 2004 was the last time that those teams played? I mean, I wasn't really even paying attention to anything at that point in my life the last time these teams played.
Yeah, and Memphis is really good. I think Bob made a point a few weeks ago on the pod that in that first round game last year, Memphis played Florida Atlantic, and it went down to the wire.
Yeah,
and who knows? Maybe if Memphis wins that game, they're going to the Final Four instead of Florida Atlantic.
Hey, the Chandler Lawson Bowl too.
Yeah,
forgot that
yeah.
matchup.
How about that? Yeah, if Chandler Lawson, if Memphis keeps moving on in that NCAA tournament, who knows if Chandler Lawson transfers? And then who guards Zach Edey in that exhibition is probably Makai Mitchell. Appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to us ramble for the last 20 or 25 minutes. I think we covered a lot of ground again. Do us a favor, and if you're listening to this, like Whole Hog Sports wherever you get, like and subscribe to Whole Hog Sports wherever you get your podcast. You can also go to the Whole Hog Sports YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. That way you get noties whenever the podcast comes out. We're really enjoying this. I'm loving the video element to this. I think it makes it twice as good. And I think the pod was already pretty good before that. Blake and Spencer and Brent and Chip and all those guys have done a great job getting us set up with this. We got a sweet logo in the background too, man. I mean,
designed by Scottie.
Yeah, that was
man of many talents.
Decent summer work on Canva from me. Well, I probably should have been doing something else. But yeah, appreciate you guys being here. Blake, always good to have you chime in. We're going to have to figure out what to do next week since I'll be in the Bahamas, but I think we'll definitely get that figured out and get
maybe
you some
Blake and I put
content
a
delivered.
picture of the Bahamas behind us in here, and we can pretend we're there with you.
I'm actually lobbying just because this pod is getting to be so successful and it's really taking off. I'm lobbying for them to also send me to the Bahamas so we could
There you go.
And maybe we kind of do we'll get some wireless mics and we'll both be sitting on surfboards like in the water, talking hoops. I don't know how safe that is with electronics and stuff. We might have to do it, on a
just don't fall off, dude. Don't fall off.
Hey, stay tuned, everybody. We'll see where this goes.
What are you up to next week?
I'm going to be a sicko and at the Arkansas-Missouri football game. So
yeah, that is real sicko behavior right there, buddy.
Prayers for me, everybody.
Again, for the third time, appreciate you guys listening in. We'll be back next week in some form or fashion. I may be Zooming in with either Matt or Blake or Ethan or somebody, but yeah, we'll get you some BPMA content from the Bahamas. I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully we can get some pretty unique stuff, maybe get a player interview or two and stick that in the podcast. Looking forward to it. For Ethan Westerman and Blake Sutton, I'm Scottie Bordelon. Appreciate you listening in to the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America. We will see you next week.